We're recording now. We're getting started.
Hello, everyone. Well, quickly, I guess I'll just let you guys do your own introductions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'm John, by the
awesome.
way.
Christopher.
Nice to meet you, Christopher. I love your
Well, should you begin then?
Okay.
I'm not going to introduce
No.
myself.
I spent no time on this campus.
Okay.
You mean either.
Yeah.
Me neither. I'm sick of this. This is
Fantastic.
my friend here.
Okay.
Alright, we're gonna do a teacher calling now.
My name is EJ Johnson, coming out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Thank you, I was for sure. But I am a content creator. I do a lot of content for around Black history and culture on social media. Also a documentary filmmaker that looks at race and social issues. Right now I'm working on a 3-part series about Black women and medical racism, so looking at the historical issues of that and also contemporary issues. So that's going to be released at the end of this month. We've been working on it for like 2.5 years. A long time coming, but thankfully we'll be having that out. I'm also a former educator where I've taught in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas for many years. Yeah. That's it.
Am I too close to him?
No, no, no.
I'm so
I like to be
glad.
close.
I'm so glad that we're.
We're all doing this.
Hi everyone, I am Candace Durham. I'm the co-founder, CEO of the B-Suite. I am currently working on healing myself mentally and physically at the moment. I'll be back doing lots of B-Suite things in about a month or so. But I'm so happy I was able to get here. Almost wasn't here, but I'm happy that I'm here to have this conversation. Navigating racism at work has been my entire career. Like EJ, I used to be an educator. Nope, he's in 121.
That's next door.
Yeah, I used to be an educator. I was an elementary school teacher for a hot, when I say hot sec, I mean a hot sec. It was terrible. And I switched over to high school English and absolutely loved it, but left the space for reasons that we'll get into. And now I lead the B-Suite, also lead a second company called Magic Consulting. We are a consulting and executive search firm for nonprofit organizations. That's me.
Hi everyone, I'm Martraz Rivera. I use he, him pronouns. I am the CEO and founder of The Professional Storyteller, where I use the power of story, or embrace the power of story to create a more inclusive world. The through line of all that I do as an artist, as a creative entrepreneur, is storytelling. So I have a written book. Books are available for purchase, $12. And I also have a speaker coaching program for aspiring emerging speakers. And I also have a professional and personal development side of that coaching business within the Professional Storyteller. I have a podcast called the Ma and Me podcast, which is new. And then I have my old podcast, Marking the Path. And then I have choreography. I do movements. So I do choreography on dance companies at the intersection of dance and disability, which is how I met Candace. So that's who I am in a nutshell. And I'm based here in Atlanta, Georgia, but was raised in Jersey. So I'm a Jersey Rican. And I've lived in New York City, I was in the Bay Area, and now Atlanta's home.
And just quick clarifying, no, I do not dance. So I just want to make that
Oh,
clear. I don't have a lick of rhythm. Never
We all
will.
do. If you have a body, you can dance.
Right.
You may not do it professionally, but you can dance, you can move. Okay.
But Mark is on the board of an amazing nonprofit organization called Access Dance Company. And I had the pleasure of working with their board through Imagine. So just for clarity.
That's what I meant when we got connected.
Yeah,
I was
not
trying-
dancing.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
Well, that's amazing. All of them are gonna pivot.
All that.
And seeing you.
No, I'm kidding. So, first question for the panel. Can you please share a personal experience that you've had with racism in the workplace, and how did you handle it? I want to be able to give people like a toolbox almost of like different responses or things that you've used in the past that you have found successful.
Somebody else start.
Broad question.
I can start with that. I also want to be mindful that I am a light-skinned Latino on this panel. I know that historically, although I'm Puerto Rican, part of the African diaspora, I recognize that my privilege as a light-skinned person on this panel is a privilege to be beside these amazing folks, and so I want to thank you all for opening up the space. But for me, growing up in a Black and brown community, both within my own family home and in the larger context of Jersey, it was really interesting that I didn't realize how poor I was until I got to college. And I didn't realize that I was so articulate until I got to college and all the white professors and all the white students were like, oh, you're so articulate to be from Patterson, New Jersey. Like, I have people say that verbatim. And, you know, as a young nonprofit organization founder and leader of my own dance company for disabled and unstable dancers at 17, the dance community at large is very white-led and very white woman-led. And so I had a woman at a dance studio in New Jersey say to me, you know, when they were introducing me to someone who came to the studio, they said, oh, you know, oh yeah, he's one of our work studies, you know, he can't afford to take classes, so he works for us to get classes here. He's one of those inner city kids. And I was in the suburb, and it was you know, I had to like bite my tongue for that moment. And I remember saying to myself, I will never let opportunity or advancement in my professional development, I hate to say this phrase now that he became president, trump my personal dignity, right? And so that's when I read her to Phelps later and quit that internship. But that was maybe the early onset of how racism in my career was so pervasive. And it always started with that one sentence, you're so articulate. Because what they're really saying, which is code for, oh, we didn't expect you to speak so well. And oh, how dare you call yourself, even now, people say, what do you mean a professional storyteller? I was like, do you not see what I do? I do it well. But it took me a long time to get to claim that identity, because in the white supremacist culture that we work in and live in, unfortunately, we are either considered Oreos or, you know, we're considered trying to be white, when really I'm just being myself and I have access to education and opportunities that my relatives never got access to, right? And so for me, navigating my career as often the youngest, often the most physically queer one, often the only disabled one, in those spaces made me feel really isolated. And I didn't see the possibility for my life because there was no visibility for people like me. Which is why I believe using our stories creates possibility and increases representation. So representation in itself isn't going to change the world, but if it lets one other person see themselves reflected, then they know what's possible, right? And so, although I experience a lot of racism, microaggression, sometimes macroaggression, sometimes overt BS, you know, I had to learn how to navigate and code switch. So now I can get to a point where I don't have to code switch, you know? So.
100%. I think for me, one particular moment comes to mind when I was in the education space. I was an administrator for I was an administrator. And one of the things that you see in the nonprofit space in education above anything else is the almighty white savior complex. I am here, I am white, I have come to save the little black kids, little brown kids in the world. And also you, because you work here and you're also not white.
You're my certificate.
Right, it's a mess. And, you know, I worked across multiple nonprofit organizations and schools, school districts, and I saw it everywhere. And once I leveled up, as I say, and became a senior leader in those organizations, it became even more directed towards me, as if, you know, the only reason I got the job that I got the salary that I got the benefits that I got, was because it was given to me. Not because I earned it, not because I'm great at what I do, not because I spent years in school learning things, right? But because I'm a white woman here to save you and give you this job. And I remember having a conversation with my supervisor, who is a white woman, a well-to-do white woman, New Orleans.
Not the side eye.
I'm just looking back here. And one day I was getting ready to recruit for my own team, to expand my team. And she told me, she was like, I'm gonna let you do this, but I really feel like you could just keep doing all this by yourself. And I was like, well, why do you think that? Because we had been behind. I was leading all of our recruitment for 2 schools. And I don't know if you all have ever recruited for a school, but it's hard. It's real hard. And she felt as though my need to expand my team and have support was some sort of failing on me. I remember us getting into this huge back and forth, and I was like, but you budgeted for this last year. This was always the plan. And we just kept going back and forth, and there was lots of microaggressions that came out of that conversation, and I blew up. So I never really learned how to code switch, and this was a moment where I probably needed that skill, and I didn't have it. I went off. I made this lady cry.
Well, I don't think much make my women cry.
That part.
And that's that. You know, I wasn't gonna say it.
I'm listening.
No, I can't say part of recording this.
Yeah. And I was for sure going to lose my job in my mind. I was like, oh man, like, dang, Candace, you did it. You did it this time, girl.
I made this girl cry. Look.
But, and here's the thing, and I am not an advocate for what I did at all, but there's something in that white savior complex where she felt powerful in that moment, even though she's demonstrating a lack of that power, because she knew that she got me to that point of anger and frustration. And when I tell you, for the next year of my life, she made it an absolute living and would refer back to that moment and held it over my head until I left. It was terrible. And so that entire experience is the experience, but it started in that conversation, and it was because I felt like I didn't have any power. I felt like I could not advocate for myself, that I could not advocate for the team that I needed and the team that I was on to get the support that we needed to do the work that was important, which was to hire teachers for kids, because kids can't go to school without teachers. And at the end of the day, for me, for my team, all people of color, with the exception of my boss, we had a mission to support the kids. And that was important to us because of our background, where we came from, what we believed in. She didn't care about any of that. And so every time something was needed, it went in one ear and out of the other. But yeah, that's savior complex. It's a thing.
So I'm gonna take it way back a little bit. So I'm gonna go back to childhood. So it's interesting because I feel like sometimes people talk about like, kind of like what's this on the show I can imagine? Like the first moment you realized you was black. You know, you kind of had that great, realization. But for me, it happened really early on. So I was 6 years old, and for so long I didn't realize this particular moment had really been the trajectory of so much of what I do even until today. When I was 6 years old, my family moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we didn't realize there was a Klan rally happening in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay, and I used to tell this story even to younger folks. I want folks to know, like, I'm young, and I literally was in the middle of a Klan rally, and so we were at a motel that we were staying at, and I remember my dad being on the edge of the, outside, like on the patio, and so I'm like 6. I'm like, what is he looking at? He's looking down at something. So my mom, my younger brother, and sister inside the motel room. I go outside and I look to see what he's looking at, and look down and see all these men in white hoods, right? And so I'm like 6 years old, so I'm looking at them. I look at my father. He has this really, strong look. And of course, when you're a kid, you think that your father's like the strong person, all this kind of stuff, but he looks really scared. So by default, I'm scared. I remember making eye contact with one of the individuals with the white hoods on. And so it wasn't until much later in college we had an assignment. And they were like, we want you to essentially like map your life story trajectory. And so I didn't realize, and I went back to this moment, but subconsciously I've been doing so much around particularly Black history and wanting to document and talk about and preserve it, but realizing this moment had played a very pivotal role, because at the age of 6, I had to really learn very quickly what racism is. It's kind of like that, I call sometimes the old school race, like literally Klan racism, right? Seeing Klan, Klansfolk at the age of 6. And so it wasn't until some years later I was teaching a course and we were talking about racism and stuff like that. And sometimes I would tell the story to students. And I was like, you know what? I never actually went back to look at the actual photos. So I have it so visual in my head and went back and Googled, what happened that particular time in Tulsa, Oklahoma, looking at the Klan rally and all the things that was happening in the city and realizing that I was in there, but that very pivotal moment has always made me just like, everything I've done has been in some sort, really, what's what I'm looking for? Way to talk about but preserve Black histories, but advocating for our experiences in its fullness, if that makes sense. And that had been a very pivotal moment. So necessarily, there's been tons of stuff through jobs and stuff too, but I think that moment was my first like real encounter as a 6-year-old Black boy about race and what that looked like. And I feel like my life trajectory has been on certain pathways since then. So
I'm sorry. Racism sucks.
Okay.
Just in short.
I do not disagree.
Okay, so you all have talked about how you're leaders in your respective fields. I'm wondering how those early examples of like racism have then affected affected how you've grown as a leader and how that your leadership now is like that focal point. I'm wording that so poorly, but do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I think so.
Yeah, how have your experiences shaped your leadership and how
you lead or
how you lead and how you like create a more equitable or inclusive
Great question, Jim.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it has shaped everything. It's impacted everything. I think racism sort of stunted my growth. And so I've shifted and pivoted to create a new purpose in what I do. The B-Suite literally came about because of the story I told you previously. It is a direct result of the
You can't. We're
of
going
the right?
Maybe we should put this together so first you can.
And that's what we're talking
That's how
about.
pervasive it is,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
That's how that we think that we have to, not just to interrupt you,
No, go ahead.
but that we think that we have to be a certain level of professionalism that you, as the CEO of the organization that's sponsoring this, has to ask.
Yes.
Can I be perfect? Can I be authentic?
Right. Can I be authentic? That's
Right.
the question. And it has taken me a long time to even get to the point where I feel almost authentic.
What's a daily choice?
Right. And it's hard. It is so hard. I have, there's been moments where I was like, wait, should I dress like this? Do I need to dress like that? And intersectionality is a whole other piece of the puzzle, being a young Black woman. I've had conversations with my partner where I felt the need to dress older to make sure people heard me, and they still didn't listen. I felt the need to, show up differently in spaces. Anyway, but back to the question, I feel like my leadership has been stunted by the racism that I've experienced because of a lack of resources, a lack of support. Even thinking back to the example that I gave previously, professional development in work is key, right? You can't grow if you aren't being supported in that way, right? You can only Google so much and find so many books until you need to talk to someone, go to a conference, do whatever, take a class. And when people hang, oh, you got it, you're a smart Black girl, over your head, right? They don't give you the tools that you need to be supported and to grow. And I never got those things, right? I spent how many years in education? A lot of them. Not being supported, not being developed. And so when I went out on my own thinking I got it, I did not have it. I did not have it at all. And I had to go back to school. I had to spend hours Googling things, trying to figure out what the heck I was doing to make sure that I could create this business. And it's been super challenging, but it's also been super rewarding to know that without all of those tools for so many years, I could figure it out. and now I'm also able to help other people, which was the pivot. I think it was a necessary pivot in my life, and I'm so proud to be able to be here and like have these conversations and support people and getting past the hurdles of racism and bullshit in the world.
Yeah. Do you want to go or do you want to go?
Oh, you go ahead.
You know, EJ.
I mean, you want me to go, I can go, but.
Now, okay, now.
The talking piece, come on, talking piece.
You know, like this idea around exceptionalism is something I've often had to combat in my professional development. It's like, oh, you were the youngest, and yes, historically that matters, right? Because so much of our history gets devalued or misrepresented or underrepresented or not told at all. And so I often had to combat being the youngest one. And I think for me, what I learned about from good leadership that I've had, good supervisors and good managers, and the terrible ones, is that I'm not meant to work for other people. I am meant to work with other people. And there's a difference when you're working with others and for others. And so, you know, God told me in 2020 when I was working with an organization I can't name, we're recording, that I had to go full time as a storyteller, and I had to go on and the way God, you know, you tell God your plans, and He's like, well, I told you to do this, but you didn't do this, and I didn't do it. We'll have a hard 2 years till you do it full time. And the way my life has transformed the last 9 months, it's been the hardest I've ever worked in my life. And also the most fulfilling. Right? To go from making $0 in January, because you know I just got laid off from my part-time consulting job last year, the holidays, no one was hiring anybody. January is a slow month for me. February, March, not big speaking month for me for obvious reasons. So I was like, oh God, yeah, it's a Pride Month, it's had to pay my bills. But God said no. Honor the calling of your life. And so what I've come to realize through the good and the bad supervisors and leadership that I've had in my workplace was I meant to work with others, not for others. And that's why consulting is not an arm of my business. Because even as a consultant, you are beholden to the client deliverables, right? And so for me, what did it mean to be a creative entrepreneur? To do my art and sustain my livelihood. And not just survive, but thrive, right? And cash flow is always an issue, right? But I always tell people, like, I'd rather work 1,000 times harder for myself and see the fruits of my labor multiply than to do it for cents on the dollar for someone else who would never value my contribution to its mission, right? Because it's my calling, not their calling. And so how, you know, what I've learned through that is how there was never a roadmap for someone like me, a brown, poor, crippled, queer, femme, sissy, queer man. There is no roadmap for someone like me. I've never seen myself in totality on television on the stories that I consume. So I wrote a book, also available for purchase, that talks about that, right? Okay. My name is Mark, I'm good at marketing. It's quite remarkable. But this idea around, I know the puns are ridiculous. And so this idea around how do I, you know, really build a career and a life for myself that centers the calling of my life. And what I had to realize was, if I honor my why, if I focus on my why, the universe, God, whatever you believe in, will make the how reveal itself. And recently I had a consulting contract, got terminated early, and I lost over $3,400. And I was like, oh shit, right? And that same day, Pfizer booked me for a speaking engagement, which means I got the money I lost and then some. And it was the first time in 9 months that I woke up, because of the consulting client work that I had to do, I woke up depressed and anxious about work. Why? Because I deferred from my why, because I was overthinking of the how. When God said, you were called to do this, let me figure out how you're gonna survive the slow months of speaking engagements over the summer. Right? And so what I've learned, you know, the best leaders I know in my life are people who have dared on themselves, who have bet on themselves. Right? And that to me makes all the difference. And you know, we talk about first gen, being the first college graduate in my family, first high school graduate, first creative entrepreneur, there is no blueprint. Right? And so we have to Google. We have to go back to school, take up these programs, come to these free conferences, and have these opportunities to build community, because we're already starting from a deficit. Because of white supremacy culture, because of sexism and misogyny, right? Because of queerphobia and transphobia. But just because we start from the deficit doesn't mean we maintain at the deficit.
well, I'm gonna leave because Mark just dropped a sermon. That was that. I was sad at that. I was, but you know, that's so real though. That's
Yeah, cut it out.
That's so real though. But you know, I think to your question, I think for me, racism has robbed balance in my life. And so as a person who,
You said what's the word you said?
balance.
Oh, balance.
Yeah, it has robbed balance.
That's deep. Say more.
You know, as a person, y'all know or follow my content, y'all know I'm a history person, so I'm big on Black history and stuff like that. So I'm constantly talking to elders in my family, things of that nature. And I have some videos you can see on my social media where I interview my grandmother, and I normally talk to her about her life growing up as a Black woman in the Jim Crow Texas, the job she had to do, the experiences. But one day I was like, I'm gonna ask a different question. I was like, Granny, if you could have like done anything, like when you were my age, like think of like your 20s, 30s, like that time period, what would you done? She's like, first I understand the question, she's like, what do you mean? I was like, you could have done anything as a Black woman, you know, you still live in the South, what would you done? She's like, I wish I would have traveled, or could have wanted to travel. Very simple, right? Like even me getting on a plane, coming here, anytime I'm traveling, even today, she's always like, oh, it's a big deal. She's like, oh my gosh, you travel so much. And I think it's not a big deal, but then I realized I'm talking to a woman who picked cotton from the South, and she was telling me like, you know, even traveling, she's like, honey, yeah, I don't think we would have did that because to see Black people traveling back in those times in the South, it could have been a problem, right? And so like, it was a real thing. And so I'm like, I just get on a plane and go somewhere, but for her, these are like, it's a whole different world than what we're growing up in. And so I often look at my selfish story because I'm a part of all these other folks before me. You know, I come 3 out of 4 grandparents who pick cotton. I still have relatives that live on a plantation in Louisiana, the area that our families was enslaved at. So I'm very cautious that I'm like very close to all of this. And so I say that as sometimes I work so hard because I'm like, my ancestors didn't get you. Like, you know, I come from people who picked, you know, in the fields in Louisiana and Texas, and grandfather couldn't learn how to read and write, so he bought a house by signing an X on his name. And you know, I go to visit the ancestors' graves on a plantation, so I gotta work hard, right? Because they didn't have these opportunities, but then at the same time realizing that they also didn't have a lot of time to rest, right? Because they're trying so hard as people of color, Black folks, and from the South, we're trying to survive, which means we're doing everything. There is no time to process. There is no time to rest. You know, we're learning how to do all these things. So I mean by racism is so balanced in some ways for so many of us, it's like we're operating on all the extremes. We don't necessarily have that knowledge of how to do both because we come from folks who work the fields, who have cleaned the houses, who have to take care of all the children of people that they didn't bear, but like they're doing all this to survive just to make ends meet. So I'm like, this is the people I come from. And I'm very proud of it because I often tell the story. Like I tell people like, I'm black from the South, my people, you know, I come from folks that pick cotton, and I'm very proud of the legacy I come from. But I also recognize that now I'm having to also learn how do I work hard to honor their legacy, but also how do I balance that with rest, make sure I'm taking care of myself. Because we also come from all these health issues where I know people have literally worked themselves probably to death in these health situations because of just how they were born in this world. So for me, when I think of racism, it's like raw balance, you know, for a lot of us, and being able to understand what that balance even is for my life, that as a, you know, person in the early 30s, still trying to figure out. So a lot of what we deal with comes from generational stuff, and we were literally born into it. So we're trying to figure it out, you know, in our generation from folks who couldn't or did not, or not able to figure it out from generations past.
May I just add? Sorry, because you got me crying. You know, I'm a crybaby though, so I'm trying to cry till you you know, but what I think is so important, and you said that so beautifully, this idea around we inherit these things, right? And that oftentimes we focus on generational trauma, that we forget that we come from a generation of resilient people. And that's tomorrow's camp, so I'm not going to talk too much about resiliency today. But to endure a society that centers whiteness, even though white people are now the global minority in this country, they maintain the majority of the power and influence, right? Because of the systems they developed on our backs, on our ancestors' backs, right? And this idea around how do we cultivate rest and play as leaders? Because we came up at a time when, yeah, we still played outside before the street lights came on, and we were learning how to type on a Mac, right? So you and I were close in age, I think we're all close in age when I'm speaking relatively. We have both
the rise of social media, the beepers, the cell phones, you know, the Nokia, the flip, Motorola, you know, that whole era, yeah, that whole era, right? And so we kind of have that era where we grew up knowing both types of worlds, the worlds where we had physical interaction and playing with our hand and playing outside before it got too dark out and saying, get your ass home before the street lights get on, right? Or don't leave that porch, right? And then we have the side where everything's on social media and we're archiving, we're telling content, we're telling stories. But I think what we don't talk enough as entrepreneurs, especially as creative entrepreneurs, is the toll that the grind culture takes on us. And that to be a creative, we need to make space to live. Because we need to live in order to be able to create. Right? I can't create something different or new if all I'm constantly doing is chasing the bag because I have to survive in this capitalist society. Right? And so that's why now, when a company comes to me and says, well, this is what we can afford, I have a list of referrals. Here you go, thank you, but no thank you. Because I'm not going to take on pennies worth of work when I can say yes to Pfizer and get my full fee and pay my bills for a whole 2 months. Right? And so it becomes how do you know, deconstruct and know how to work within the system as you try to dissolve the system. And so for me, rest and balance has been critical to my success because as an entrepreneur, your brain never turns off. You're constantly thinking. I didn't bring my laptop to the summit today.
Me neither. I couldn't do it.
I couldn't. I didn't bring it. I want to be fully present because in order for me to learn and grow as a leader, I need to live in the moment. Right? And so much of our lives, because of the white supremacy, because we're starting from a generational deficit, right? We have to work, we always have that saying, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far, and even then, getting half as far won't be enough to the world who sees you.
And connecting both points, I think the piece I'll add, we're talking about rest, we're talking about balance, is boundaries. And I know we're probably going to get into some strategies and things, but I will say therapy has been absolute key in me understanding what boundaries are, what they look like, how to set them, how to uphold them, even for myself, right? Deciding to leave my laptop at my hotel was a boundary, right? Because I knew if I brought that thing, I'm gonna be sitting here working, and I haven't worked in like 3 weeks. Because again, I mentioned I'm working on healing physically, but it's hard to turn that off, right? And one thing I will say, my best friend says this all the time, you can do anything for a certain amount of time, but you have to set the boundary. And when I started consulting on my own, trying to build a business, I literally locked myself in a space for a certain amount of time. I gave myself a timeline and said, I'm gonna build this company and I'm gonna do it in this time. And I just gotta figure it out. And I did, right? So I could turn myself back on, so I could turn the creative side of me, the social side of me back on, knowing that, all right, I've set up the things that I need in order to be successful in this venture, but also to go back to being a person, being me. And setting that boundary was absolute key to like kicking off things with success. After failing for several months, that was the plan. But setting those boundaries is key. You gotta set boundaries with yourself. You have to set boundaries with other people, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're, at work, whatever the case may be. If you're, working in a service-based situation where you have clients, you gotta set boundaries with clients up front, before you sign, before you cash a check, whatever the case may be, and even setting boundaries around checks, because woo, Lord.
How this year, honey?
Because if you don't, folks will walk all over you, and it's just gonna stress you out even more. And we don't have time for that.
Really quick, because I feel like that was very heavy. Can everyone just close their eyes really quick? Take some deep breaths in. Unclench your jaws, relax your shoulders. Breathe out. And my next question, we obviously were just talking about, but how do you deal with and cope with and help yourself and make sure that you're good in order to be good for everyone else?
Therapy. Therapy. And one new thing that I'm working on is identifying hobbies. I don't know if y'all sit there and think about it. What hobbies do y'all have? Do y'all really have hobbies? Do people really have hobbies? Because when you think about your 20s and 30s, we're just out here doing.
Right.
So
we're dipping it.
Exactly. And so I recently had a session with my therapist where I was talking about, okay, I need to do a thing, not just being out and around. Like, I love being around my people. I love you, EJ, but I also need time for me to just sit and zone out.
I love you, but I love you, and
Right. Because it's hard to turn off the brain, but you kind of have to do that sometimes, right? You got to recenter yourself and spend time with yourself. And going back to what Mark was saying, a lot of it goes back to childhood, right? Think about the things that you loved to do as a young person. What were those things that you got away from, and start doing them again? So I recently have spent a lot of time sitting in a chair with my feet up, learning how to cross stitch. When I was a kid, my aunt used to, I'm gonna say make me do, because I didn't actually want to do them, even though in hindsight I think I had fun doing it. These things called latch hook kits. Okay, I see a nod, like we know what that is. All right, cool. It's similar to what folks do to make carpets. Like, anyway, it's a little arts and crafts thing. She used to buy these little kits all the time, and I used to do that. And we used to just sit there and like watch The Price is Right. Like, that was the thing. And that's what I've been doing. And I've had so much joy in the last couple of weeks just sitting there doing that. Like, zoned out, me and these tiny little needles and this tiny little thing with my big fat fingers, just trying to figure it out. But it's just so much fun. So I would encourage anyone who is trying to figure out how to take care of yourself, think back to the things that you enjoyed as a younger person and try to get yourself back to some of those things, because you might find some joy in that and some peace.
Yeah, and I think for me, I like to remind myself that white supremacy, a pillar of white supremacy is urgency. And as a creative, my work isn't life or death. If something that has to do with life or death, you better call 911. Find the nearest emergency room. Right, because me being your coach, storytelling speaker coach, me being your consultant, nothing that I do is life or death ever, right? Except maybe a client might say they're feeling, suicidal, and I get them, outsource them out to get appropriate help. But, nothing I really do is life or death. I'm a choreographer, I'm a writer, a podcaster, a speaker. None of this is life or death. Does the work matter? Yes. But you know what? I can't create from nothing, right? I create starting from nothing, but I can't create if I'm just empty, if I'm tired, if I'm not energized, if I'm not working, like daily walks are my thing now. That's not a hobby, it's more of a mental health and also physical thing, but I used to go outside more as a kid, and somewhere along the way, between high school and college and life as an adult, that kind of went away. Outside became you spend money when you go outside.
Exactly.
But honey, right? You step one foot outside your door, you're like, oh, that's $20, that's the Uber, right? And so for me, staying home was also a form of rest and also a way to save money. But I realized going out for a walk doesn't cost me anything. I was telling my good friend Jason, I was like, listen, because like money's tight, and I said, Jason, walking around with me, hitting my 5,000 steps a day don't cost anything. Me cooking us dinner at home don't cost you anything. Right? You don't have to come to my house with a bottle of wine. You don't have to come to my house with other substances. You know what I mean? Like, good, right? But part of what I realized is I am the friend who sends calendar invites for personal interactions and dinners, right? And it's not to be pretentious. It's because when I am with people who I love, like Jad, right? I am intentional about being present. And there are times when Jad invites me out to dinners and stuff in group settings, I'm just like, I don't have energy, because I'm an ambivert. So yes, I come off very extroverted, but I prefer one-on-one interactions, 1 to 2 at max. And after stuff like this, I have to shut down by myself for a few hours and get some rest, right? And so for me, realizing that urgency is a pillar of white for me, nothing. And I tell myself, I'm still a work in progress, but like, even like when I started traveling again after the pandemic this year, I forgot how much traveling for work takes out of me. The day I did my first workshop for how me and Jan met, I had just flown from California after being at a conference for almost a week, jet lagged, had to do dinner with the client and Jan and all of them that night. And then the next morning I had to do a 3.5 hour workshop on how to love yourself as a queer man of color.
And you're awake today?
Well, that was, no, what I'm saying, that was early this year, and so I forgot.
I know.
Oh, I'm still awake. Yeah, I'm still awake. But then the next day, I crashed all day. I was useless. And I said, I can't do things back to back anymore. That was cute when it was virtual and you weren't traveling. You were just going from one Zoom room to the other. But now we're talking about time zones. We're talking about regions of the country, virtually going across the country, around the world. Like, I don't have that energy. And so really recognizing that having a proper meal, drinking water, going for my daily walks, having my therapist, having my business coach, having my friends anchor me. Because I think so many times, because I was so young when I started my career, I don't know what it's like to be a regular 20-something-year-old or a high schooler. I've been paying myself since I was 15. I've been someone's boss since I was 17. Right? So I never had a quote-unquote regular childhood. And so for me, sometimes I get awkward around people my own age. I'm just like, oh, I feel uncomfortable, or like, it's just like, no, like, just be, work isn't everything. At the end of the day, I just listened to Viola Davis's audiobook. I don't like audiobooks, but I gave her a shot because I haven't been able to get to read much anymore in person because of my ADHD. And her audiobook, I can't recommend it more. She reads it herself, and it's like a fucking masterclass of like monologuing 101 for actors. It's just a fantastic storytelling book. And she said she was talking about why she adopted her child. And as a queer person who didn't grow up with a father and grew up in a very unstable home, I never thought I wanted to be a parent. But then she said I didn't want a series regular to be on her tombstone. She didn't want, there's no U-Haul Denzel Washington told her behind the hearse of your casket. That all your successes, the awards, the money, all that, you leave all that shit behind. The legacy you leave will be the people whose lives you impacted and the people whose lives you created.
What's the question again? No. I would say, but Candace and Mark said, just kind of adding on to, I do a little bit of both of those things. Like, recently I really I love to, Candace probably knows this, I love to like run and jog, which, jogging is not so good on my knees anymore. That's something I do all the time anymore as much, but now, let me do a walk. And, one of the benefits of living in New Orleans is like being able to just walk a few blocks and there's the river and being able to sit by the river. And I'm not sure, I feel like most people have been to New Orleans, and so, in New Orleans, the dead are buried above ground. So I live very close to a cemetery, so it's a very visual reminder of like time. I think I've always been very conscious that we're only here for so much time, and to constantly think about it. I literally live a block away from the cemetery, and so I often see this, and thinking about time and how to take care of myself in this space because we don't have so much time, and so doing small things like walking and decompressing and letting the anxieties away in the river or whatever, in the banks of it. And if I have more time, I personally like to center myself. I go back to my great grandmother's village in Louisiana, and just being there in the country where my folks were at and have been at, and still got a lot of family at or whatever in that particular area. But it just does something to ground me and center me, and still like words I'm still looking for. Like I said, folks who know me know I'm really big into my Black history and stuff like that, but it centers me in a way that I almost have questions for when I get to be in the place that I know that my grandmother's grandmother, was always at, where they, experienced and they lived. And so I regularly try to go there and pay respects, but it like centers me for a while. So speaking of which, that's like my thing right now. I'm trying to figure out the next couple of weeks when to go. So I feel like life's getting crazy. I need to go and go pay my respects and check on the ancestors. So.
And one thing I just want to add, Oprah got me into doing a daily gratitude journal. And I just write 3 things I'm grateful for every morning before I start my work day. I didn't get to do it today because I was rushing, because I want to be late. But like this idea around like that, before I even open my laptop, I do that. I sip my Starbucks. I eat my cheese Danish, extra toasted.
No.
Okay, you are my peoples. I shut the gratitude journal. I write an affirmation, my book of affirmations I'm working on to publish one day. Put that aside and then get to work then. And there is no joy without gratitude. And I'm so grateful to be in this community with y'all. Thank you so much for having me.
Candace, real question is 3:15. I don't know how long this is supposed to go for.
Till 3:15.
Oh.
There we go, look at
Well,
that.
there we go, because I'm gonna ask a question.
Any questions from y'all?
Any questions from the audience?
Like officially wrapped?
Um,
Much needed.
That was nice.
Yeah.
I enjoyed. Yes.
What's your
you.
Interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Interesting line.
Great people. Interesting.
Thank
Thank you for our moderator.
I did have a comment though. Yes, it's more of a statement, like applying to what you said, Candace, is so interesting. Is like when you face that experience with the white lady who started crying and weaponized.
Which one?
With the nonprofit, and how she cried and weaponized herself and then used that against you for 1 year. Like that's actually very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. But also, even in liberal America and liberal thinking, people of color or marginalized institutions, when they start creating their own thing, they doctrinize this mentality on their own and then start marketing as their own people.
Yep.
Because when you were saying that, it reminded me of, a minority-owned agency, a black-owned agency actually, that I work with. I don't know if I think I spoke with Mark about it.
It's
you know.
being recorded, just so you know. So
Oh yeah. I'm not saying the name of
Yeah,
it.
just so you know.
I'm not saying the name of
I'll
the
be back
agency.
Friday.
Oh, but you know me, like I'm unfiltered at all. Like, so
That's why I said it.
Yes.
Because I know that.
That's exactly.
That's why I said it.
You know,
They can say whatever. Yes.
that's interesting you say that.
Yeah.
Kind of glad it is being recorded because that's something I don't find often enough. And I think chronologically, I probably trump everybody in this room. That's very, very good point to make. And I think it's probably something that needs to come into the conversation the next time we assemble. And I'll make my
Oh,
business
yes.
to be here
I love it.
because what I see more so than not,
It's internalized.
I was born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama, ended up in Atlanta, a place I never thought I would end up in. I've lived in the Midwest as well. And so, to your point, we need to deal with that.
Yeah.
And we need to put it out there.
Right.
And we need to put it out there on all levels, on inclusion, okay? How we do in our own specific quadrants, areas, okay?
Can I also?
Because to
yes.
your point, where we go, and we do, and then we get to certain levels, and then this becomes exclusive, and we end up doing it, replicating, I think what you're saying.
Yeah. The very
Right,
system.
right, verbiage.
Yeah.
You said we're supposed to be up on the panel. Come on, chair right here. We just want
Yeah.
chair. You know you're supposed to be up on the
Okay.
She gets the back.
Yes.
I have a daughter right now, I'm 35,
Yeah.
and her race sex claim is not towards one not within her same race and sex, okay? So we gotta be mindful of it, and we have to put it out there for those that are not aware, cause they may tend to think, oh, they're trying to help, or and they don't
Yeah.
even know. Cause as you all have said along this journey today, how long it took you to even recognize it was happening, okay?
Right.
Yeah.
Because where I grew up and the connections we had with other cultures, not the perceived majority, and you spoke to
Right.
who's the majority, minority now. It wasn't until thrust into another environment that we recognized, oh, it does exist. We knew it exists, saw the water fountains, the white and the color. But because my parents taught no big eyes, little U's,
Yeah.
okay. Now my brother, who
Right.
the hue of his skin is darker than mine, the one day I went to, the one that was marked WHITE, he almost froze. But I'm saying all that to say, we have to put that
We have to
in
address
this
it.
discussion.
Well, I think the idea around not all skinfolk are kinfolk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That some of the harm that I've experienced have come from black and brown people.
That's exactly.
So,
May I add?
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean, but thank you, like, for honing in on that thought, because even part of, like, not saying why it was recorded, well, to be honest with you, why isn't it being called out? That's the thing, like, now personally for me, and I know you think I'm unfiltered, but
No.
even, I know exactly what you're saying,
Yeah.
but like, I have learned I'm ready for the consequence. I'm ready for the consequence because I don't want to diminish the truth that is not disrespectful, it's just the truth. And I'm not gonna, because for me, like, if you are a white person or a black, Latinx, Arab person. If you're mistreating me and we're collaborating together, it's gonna be called out. Now that's on you when people tell you, well, oh, he's a black man who did that. That's not my problem for calling it out. That's you. You should have known about that, knowing your intersectionality when you are treating certain people that, we're gonna hide it because you're a black woman or you're a black man or an Arab man. Like, we cannot hide it because you're a person of color. When the truth comes out of you mistreating or microaggressing your own people, and because white supremacy teaches us that,
Right.
so we're allowed to do it because, I'm a black woman. You can't touch me.
Yeah.
I'm a chief diversity officer. I can be mean to you and microaggress you, and no one's gonna touch me. I have learned, you know what? I'm gonna call it out, and I don't care. You can fire me. You don't have to work with me. I don't want to work for people anymore. I want to work with people, and when you work with people, is it working for people because they think that they own you, and they want to dictate your narrative. So it's adding up like we need to speak out.
Even Latinos, right? Like cause Dickie and I had a conversation about me being on this panel, and I said to Dickie, in the South, I'm seen as a white man. Now, never in my life has ever been called a white man before I moved to Atlanta. Cause I've never been called a white man before I moved to Atlanta. Because being born in Miami, living until I was 5, growing up in New Jersey, in the Northeast, living in New York City, living in the Bay Area,
Yeah, that's true.
everyone knew I was not white. But I come to Atlanta, and my name is Mark. They don't ask my last name, and they just assume I'm white, and they give me the side eye.
And for my era, that is not foreign.
Right.
That is the truth of the matter.
Right, but it's very binary, right? It becomes very binary, right? That in the South, you're either black or white.
Yeah.
Right? And that's all I said to Dickie. I want to be mindful that I'm not taking up too much space talking about race, but also calling out the anti-blackness within the Latino diaspora. I'm doing a journal for Prospanica, which is the largest Latino association for HR and business professionals. And we're talking about intersectionality and being co-written by the only black Latina on the staff of a mostly white Latinx organization.
Yeah.
Right? And this idea of how we have to have these conversations at the intersections, because we're not just one thing, we're multiple things. And that all compounds how we experience both internal communal oppression and external oppression from outside of our communities. And I think that for me, even the acknowledgement that I made at the beginning of this panel, acknowledging my light skin and my Latinidad, was not to point out the obvious, but to name that I know that I'm representing a community that historically has been anti-black. And I'm in a city that is primarily black, and I am seen as white. And with this, the struggle is that, it's identity, not you-identity, but we need to build more cross-collaboration and cross-coalition across identities, because I think that's the only way to hold our communities accountable to not causing harm to each other, and not replicating this white supremacist hierarchical
Which divides
bullshit
us.
that divides us.
Yeah.
Because there's a reason why the paper bag test is still prevalent today.
Yeah.
There's a reason why colorism is still prevalent. White ableism and fat phobia and all these things, because it's meant to keep us crabs in a barrel mentality. You can't get ahead of me, Candace. No. Because if you make it, then I can't make it. There's not enough of all of us. Right?
Can support my back.
You know what I mean?
No.
So I just want to thank you for naming that.
I will, I know.
We are way over time.
It's fine. I'm gonna make a closing story here. So, to that very point, the story picks up with me going to an organization led by a black person intentionally because I felt seen and heard and thought that in this new space with this black leader, this black woman leader, I'm finally going to be around my people. I'm gonna be able to do the work that I wanna do. False. Because of that internalized racism, that internalized oppression. Everything that I experienced with that previous organization showed right up tenfold in the next one. I was not heard, I was not seen. I was told that I was. I was like, yeah girl, you got this, go girl, black girl, we in this together, all that bullshit, none of it mattered. And when I did finally have the voice to speak up to this person I admired for all of the things she had accomplished as a black woman in the space that I am desperately trying to impact, what happened to me? I got fired. And that was the catalyst for all of this. And I am thankful.
Oh, that's a full diet.
Oh, it's full circle, honey.
Oh, baby.
Listen,
She buried the hatchet there.
when I hire Mark to tell my story, it's gonna be a good one, all right?
Candace, that's a.
But that was literally the catalyst for us
Yeah.
being in this space today.
Of course.
Was because of that internalized racism.
Mm.
And Lydia, I agree with you 100%. We have to have more conversations about it. And it is pervasive. It is everywhere, right?
Mhm.
When I am talking to clients and dealing with white-led organizations who have Black women as their chief diversity officer and head of DEI or head of HR, and we're still seeing all of the things that I talked about in that first story, right?
Mm.
And they're turning a blind eye to it, like, oh, I didn't see that. Oh, it's fine. Let's just go to this next DEI session. Let's just do this next survey. You know, let me just have this one-on-one conversation. It'll be fine. Let's just hire another DEI consultant. And as a DEI consultant, like, it's crazy, right? And I work with a number of organizations that have a diverse leadership team. But when I have conversations with associates, assistants, the people at the bottom of that organization, they are all telling the same story.
They be telling the truth, the real truth. That is what
The
it is.
real story.
The real story, yes.
That survey feedback,
Yes.
it do not lie.
Yes.
And they do not hold back.
I don't
They
have
gotta know
leadership.
we
And
name
all.
attached to it. That's
the first thing
Yeah,
that
that name attached.
But
Thank y'all so
yes,
much.
thank
y'all.
y'all.
You guys want a picture together?
Yeah.